Alex Show podcast.
Smart Alex Show, baby! It's great to see you, man. How have you been?
Yeah, likewise. Been great. Yeah, we moved to Queens since I last saw you. So that was a whole journey, just kind of getting situated. We got 2 kids now, changing from an apartment in Manhattan to a house in Queens. There's an adjustment there. So all in all, there's plenty of hard work that goes into it, but it's been a fun transition.
Hey, I mean, it has its perks, right? Now you got your beautiful setup in the background, got your nice little spacious little office space. You're repping
That's
the
right.
tennis game back there. I didn't know you're such a big tennis fan, man. So you grew up playing, that's your thing?
Yep. Yeah, I played through college, and my family was big into it as well growing up. Like my mom and both of her brothers played in college as well, and one of them even played on the pro tour. So
Wow.
I feel fortunate that I still play regularly and care about the sport versus some people, they can get burned out, and when they stop playing after college, they just don't even want to touch a racket for a long time. But I definitely still enjoy the sport. So.
No, that's awesome. One of my biggest regrets in life was not getting into tennis sooner, man. I wouldn't say I'm a tennis savant. I want to get more into playing. I want to learn more about the game. My first really foray into the sport was last year. I emceed a tennis tournament here in Austin. And then since then, now the marketing agency I'm working at, now we're looking at representing them and some sponsorships for their ATP tournament that they have coming in February. But it's a beautiful.
Nice.
That's where this stuff all started, with sports marketing back in the day with Rolex at Wimbledon. So it's wild to see, that's kind of the birthplace of it all.
Yeah, not a bad brand and event to be aligned with, Rolex Wimbledon. And yeah, I mean, I would suggest you throw pickleball into the mix as
Absolutely.
Well, especially in Austin. It's exploding there. Some of the people building out the professional league are actually based in Austin. So I imagine there'll be a lot of opportunities there if you want.
Yeah, no, it's exciting to see that, but we'll leave it all for the podcast, man. I'll do the intro.
Okay.
And we'll jump into it, man. I appreciate you taking the time, man. Honestly.
Yeah, do your thing.
Today on the podcast, ladies and gents, we have yet another very special guest working at the intersection of sports, entertainment, music, culture, you name it, and now cryptocurrency. He's the senior director of NFT partnerships and biz ops at crypto.com. He was the director of entertainment marketing and partnerships at the ESPN, where he landed massive partnerships with Peloton, Spotify, and more for a little documentary you guys may have heard of called The Last Dance, featuring the GOAT, Michael Jordan, that won a gazillion sports Emmys and awards. He worked as director of digital strategy and comm at Sony Music Entertainment. So you may have heard of them as well. Worked as CEO of Dancing Astronaut, covering the dance and electronic music scene. A&R, was a content producer for iTunes, much, much more. A graduate of Stanford, where he played tennis, and a Harvard MBA, the legend of a dude, Jeff Zeller. Welcome, my man.
What's happening? That was a very flattering introduction. Thank you.
Hey, you deserve it, man. And it's funny, I just added the tennis part in right now with, seeing your background and talking about the tennis. So I didn't know that.
Yeah, I keep it on the down low and work a little bit, but once Zoom meetings started happening, I couldn't hide it anymore. My regular at-home decoration just became front and center when I got on camera.
Absolutely, man. No, the stuff you got back there is cool. You were telling me a little bit about it earlier. What are some of the cool items you got back there in the background?
So tennis is very obvious, right? The rackets on the wall. Some of those are very old from, maybe the 1950s and earlier. But I do have a signed picture from Pete Sampras. He was my favorite player growing up. So that's one of the things framed up there. And then some non-tennis stuff too. I have a sneaker collaboration up top that I did work on at ESPN with Adidas. And as you mentioned, The Last Dance, I got a special DVD up there as well. So, and I've been into, collecting things like sports cards and memorabilia. So there's that stuff sprinkled in as well. tennis is the focus, but I really I like all sports.
No, it's a kick-ass setup, man. I just moved back down to Austin, so I don't have anything going on over here. We do have like a little office area over there that I'm gonna build out, and the goal is to get it like at least a fourth of as cool as yours looks. But that's awesome, man. Actually, the one of the clients we have right now at the agency, his name is Christo van Rensburg. He's from South Africa. He's actually one of the only people to have defeated Pete Sampras in
Wow.
multiple sets. So yeah, very, very cool stuff, man. I didn't know that was your favorite player, and that's cool that you got that piece of memorabilia back there.
Yeah, I got to shake that guy's hand because that's an extremely impressive accomplishment. And
How
I'm
did
just
it come
I'm
about?
just match the talking heads on ESPN. You know, they always have the best backgrounds on their home setup.
Very true. A lot of you'll collect a lot of memorabilia working in that lane, I'm sure, man. How did you get to shake his hand and all that?
No, I'm saying I want to shake the
Oh, you
guy.
want to shake his hand? Okay, gotcha,
Yeah,
gotcha. Yeah, no, that'd be awesome, man. But the sneaker collab with Adidas and the Last Dance DVD, that's epic stuff, man. You can't make that stuff up. Um, I'm curious, man. So like looking back at your career within like so many different things within the realm of entertainment, right? Sports, music, and like having pieces of memorabilia back there like that, like the Last Dance DVD. Like, what do you think of it looking back and just thinking like, wow, I'm really in this position, you know?
I would say, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is just that it's very consistent with how like my room looked when I was growing up. In the sense that a lot of this stuff behind me is just a reflection of being a fan of sports, of music, of just pop culture in general. So, I'm very happy and pleased that I've been able to align my career to be in an area that I'm just interested in and passionate is thrown around a lot. But I've always just paid a lot of attention to sports and pop culture my whole life. So it was a very purposeful decision to try to work in that lane because I was already spending so much time consuming the content coming out of those different industries. So I guess the background is just a reminder that I'm doing the thing that I care about the most.
100%. It's pretty cool. Like you said, passion's kind of a term thrown around a lot, but what's interesting to me is I've heard people say this recently a few times, like making the middle school you proud, making
Mm.
the boy version of you proud, like the things you were into as a kid, and like being able to be in those spaces, interact with those same things that you interacted with as a kid is definitely a blessing. And it's like, a lot of people don't get to do that. So it's very cool to see like yourself, how you've been able to lead a career doing that. And me, I'm trying to tap into the space and do the same. But yeah, man, I'm curious, like when you're at Stanford, right? Because your background was in management science and engineering. How'd you know you wanted to pivot and get into like marketing and sports and entertainment and all that good stuff?
It certainly wasn't premeditated. I would say so. To give context on the degree itself, Stanford doesn't have a generalized business degree.
Mhm.
People typically would either major in economics, and those people usually go down the finance or consulting route, or you would maybe major if you know for sure that you want to do marketing, you would maybe major in communications. But for me, I wasn't necessarily tied to either one of those straight off the bat. And so there was this degree that kind of was in the middle ground, management science and engineering, that was really more of a pre-MBA program. A lot of general business management principles, a lot of classes about entrepreneurship, tech startups. This was in Silicon Valley before really all of the current social media companies really got their start. Like Facebook started the year before I went to college. So there was a lot of cool, interesting stuff bubbling up in that space that I would say not a lot of people were paying attention to yet, right? The iPhone, for example, came out while I was in college. So the whole idea of building a mobile website or even an app was not really a thing. So for me, I think I just saw that there was interesting stuff happening in that tech startup space. And not being a coder myself, and therefore not being able to do computer science degree, this management science degree felt like a good way in. And then kind of once I got into the industry, then it became a question of, all right, well, which type of role within these companies am I best suited for? Is it operations? Is it sales? Is it marketing? And I think marketing ended up being the thing I landed on, simply because I'm already just paying attention a lot to what's happening in the world. And that's really what marketing boils down to, is putting out a message that's interesting enough to get on people's radar.
100%. It's interesting that you say that when you talk about like you were consuming a lot of this content and just paying attention, right? Like I think that's a trait I've like kind of seen in most successful marketers, is that it comes from a sense of like you're paying attention, you're very attentive to what's going on, what's you're hip to everything happening within these spaces, and from there you're able to cultivate messages that can connect with audiences and accomplish goals for your brand. That's pretty cool. I didn't, when I read management science on your LinkedIn, I didn't think of that being the degree, and it makes sense because like Stanford's and like a lot of Ivy League schools, like they don't have business undergraduate programs, whereas like I went to UT Austin, so we have a business undergraduate program, and it's ranked like top 5 in the country. But I always think it's because like Ivy Leagues don't have undergrad business. That's why it's ranked top 5 in the country. You know what I mean? Like it'd probably be ranked like 15th or something in the country if there was Ivy League undergrad business. But that's pretty cool, man, that you were able to like from an early time like be able to say like, okay, marketing is what's for me. So from there, like what's the journey been like, man? Like what was your first in the marketing game that's led you to where you are now?
So my very, very first job out of college was at a photo sharing startup based in Palo Alto. And I was essentially doing like customer support or community management, fielding inquiries from people on email and Twitter at that time, issues or questions they had with the product.
Mhm.
And while I was working there, Instagram was released, and it was extremely clear when Instagram came out that it was just like the far superior photo sharing startup. So that was kind of the writing on the wall for me that maybe I should look for a different opportunity, because not every startup makes it, right? And the experience that I had in community management slash kind of QA-ing our product was exactly what Apple was looking for at the time to manage the iTunes store. Apple has a reputation for everything being perfect. So there's an extremely high level of attention to detail when it comes to all of the movies, TV shows, and albums that make their way onto the iTunes store that are available for customers. So to connect back to like my previous internships, I had interned at Apple during college, really liked the company, but my internship was with a different part of the organization. And at the time, I wasn't able to get over into iTunes, which is where I really wanted to be. So really, it was just like the right timing, plus the little bit of experience that I had in my previous job of doing community management that got me that job at Apple. And so that was really, I think, my first big in, is just being on the team that manages all of the different content providers that were selling content on iTunes. So then my focus really became not just marketing generally, but content marketing, right? How do you market a new album that's coming out? How do you market a new TV show? How do you market a new movie? And that was really a crash course for me, but solidified that was a place that I liked.
Yeah, I'm curious, man, because like people think of marketing in the generic sense, but there's so many realms of marketing. Like you said, you were in content marketing, there's event marketing, there's influencer marketing. There's so many different realms in this new world we live in. Um, I I consume a decent amount of content. Like I'm big into podcasts, I'm big into other types of content. Like, how would you say how different is content marketing, man, as opposed to the other realms of marketing?
Well, yeah, I think the type of marketing that you're in is that is going to showcase what area of pop culture or whatever area you're in the most about. So when you're doing content marketing, the expectation is that you are an expert in the content itself. So if you're doing movies marketing, you're expected to really be up to date on all the new movies, who's the director, who's the actor, what movie studios have power, what are the changes in the industry. So it really becomes a question of just knowledge and building an expert knowledge base. So in my case, at that time, was watching a lot of TV shows. Reality TV was booming. I think Jersey Shore was out around that time. So I kind of represented like the younger consumer of TV shows and movies. And that's something that the team wanted to fill, right? Because iTunes was meant for all different ages, but you still needed to market content to different sectors. Gotcha. And so there were people on the team that could kind of speak for different demographics. And so they also cared that I had at that time, young person's perspective on what was cool, what was worth promoting on the iTunes store. These days, a lot of the platforms, there's some element of human kind of curation that goes into it, but actually a lot of it now is driven by algorithm and personalizing the content marketing, like showing you based on your own watch habits, the thing that you might want to watch next. But back then, that didn't really exist. It was really all about the human curation.
So when you say human curation, you mean like people like yourself that were curating the content, as opposed to now it's like the algorithm reflecting back to you the type of content that you've shown the algorithm you like to consume?
Yes, exactly. So, if you go all the way back even to, I like to use music as an example for a lot of things. If you go back to like the radio days of music, the radio stations can influence the music that was popular based on what they chose to play on the radio, because consumers didn't really have a choice.
Exactly.
When iTunes, it was the same thing. When you go to the front page of iTunes, there would be these big banners telling you, check out this new movie, or check out this new TV show, check out this new album. There was a human making that decision of which content should be promoted there. Mm-hmm. That model worked for a while, where you were marketing to the masses. But now, as you suggested, technology has enabled these platforms to not have to just choose one item, right? They could choose a documentary, if you go to the homepage of Netflix, for people who they know like documentaries. They could choose a drama TV show for people that they know like drama. Ultimately, we've just gotten better at matching people's interests with the content marketing. Absolutely. By relying on data and consumption habits.
Yeah, man, it makes me think of like watching The Social Dilemma, and like also listening to some of these other podcasts I've listened to with like the the guys who were doing coding and the developers who kind of created those algorithms on these social platforms that gave way to this evolution of how we now consume within the digital world, whether that be like, I just think of like when I turn on my my Fire Stick and the way that it presents everything to me. Like there's Amazon Prime, there's DirecTV Stream, there's different ways. It's just so crazy to think, right? And I'm very curious to your perspective on this, because like me, I just turned 24, right? So when I was growing up, there was, there's flip phones. People still use like the home phones, like literally wired up. And then there's the Blackberries, and then there's the iPhones. And now we're like very quickly, evolved into the world we're in now, right? I'm curious, like from your perspective, like what's it been like, like you were in college when Facebook came out, you were in college and early in your career when this stuff was all so rapidly evolving. Like, I feel like now we don't even know what it is. Like we do know what it is, like obviously, but in the sense that like it's still evolving so quickly. But like for you, what was it like seeing this like insane evolution of like technology and like Twitter, Instagram, all these mergers, acquisitions within the space of a Facebook and an Instagram, like, and you were working at the helm of it all, like what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a great point with referencing that Social Dilemma documentary. In isolation, each one of these platforms that got released and was competing for your attention, in isolation, I think they were things that consumers really liked and wanted. as evidenced by how quickly people adopted them and started to fill their time with those things. But in aggregate, and I think we're seeing some of the results of that now, it ends up becoming overwhelming in the sense that you are constantly connected, versus back in the day when I was just starting my career and people were slowly adopting to smartphones and slowly starting to, actually watch video content on their mobile device, not just listen to music. There wasn't the deluge of messages and notifications and new content that you get today. It was just, I would say, a lot more easy to balance with your normal day-to-day life of being active, seeing friends, whatever, versus now everything is at your fingertips. So if you're not careful, you can go down this rabbit hole and not emerge from your room for a week because there's just an unlimited amount of content being released and created 24/7. So back then it was really just exciting, I think, because the numbers of new users and new iPhone purchases would just go up and up and up every year. That's good for business because more and more people are starting to use our platform and buy stuff from iTunes. But then when you put Facebook on top of that, and we put Twitter on top of that, and then eventually Instagram, and then YouTube, and as a consumer, you're almost just expected to be on all of these platforms. That's kind of the norm. Each one of those just takes time out of your day. So I started to see it towards the end of my time at Apple. We used to wait for a bus to drive us from Cupertino up to San Francisco. And by the time I left the company in 2014, there would be a line of people waiting for the bus, single file. And instead of talking to each other, everybody was just staring at their phone in their hand, looking down. So it was this very stark kind of realization that we had reached that inflection point that people were attached to their phones 24/7. It was no longer this thing that just was used at various times throughout your day. It was something that was used the entirety of your awake time, basically.
Yeah, man, a lot to unpack there. It's wild, like seeing that inflection point in real time, and you see it in so many different examples of interaction in society now. But it's just it's a wild thing, man, to have seen it all unfold like that. It just really like you said, each platform was trying to compete for attention. And there was a lot of negative consequences that came out of that, right? And there's so many like neurological implications. Like I'm no way versed like in biology or neurochemistry or neurobiology, none of that stuff, right? But it is of interest to me how, these algorithms and the people who've developed them, these social platforms have found ways to monetize, off of figuring out people's brain chemistries and figuring out how dopamine works, serotonin, all these different psychological factors, and seeing how like we have negativity bias, and through that negativity bias you can get people to see content that conflicts them on Facebook and get them to engage by arguing, and how that has created ripple effects and polarization in society. So it's oh my goodness, man, it's just so crazy. And it's so crazy too how like at one point it was like, you could have access to information. It was good in the sense of democratization of information, but now it's gone into the dangers of misinformation, and the fact that once like it wasn't like as a consumer you had to be on every platform. Now as a business you have to be on every platform, and you have to have a social content calendar and social media best practices on Instagram, Twitter, and it's like this inundation of information in this digital information age. And it's like now the question is not how do I access all this information and consume it? It's like, how do I act on the information that I am consuming? Because we're all overloaded with notifications and info and stats and metrics. And it's just,
Yeah.
it's so wild, man. I don't know what to think of it.
Yeah, I think we just as an entire society have new challenges that are a result of the cool technology that's come out. So
Absolutely.
look back how well we dealt with those challenges, but it's clear that it's not an easy problem to solve and will take a lot of hard work.
It definitely will, and it's almost like we're at the inflection point now where people are starting to become very aware of it, and they're starting to retreat away from the digital stuff. You know, they're like, okay, here are the dangers that we need to be aware of from it, and here's how we can use it in a better fashion to where we're not addicted to it, and to where
Mhm.
we're not just inundated with it to the point where we're missing out on this face-to-face interaction and the real world. But yeah, a pretty
Yeah.
long aside that we went on there, man. But yeah, no, very interesting. So you were at iTunes in the content marketing, man. So what happened from there in your career?
So yeah, as I mentioned, I was, more video focused at the start of that time, but being in my mid 20s, I was also very interested in music and going to concerts at that time. And I kind of entered the working world as there was this boom in dance music. And so I got really interested and was consuming and knew everything about dance music. And so I got inspired really to try to just pivot a little bit in the content marketing space and try something out that was music specific. So that was a little bit of my motivation for when I took that break to go to business school, using that as an opportunity to go deeper in the music space and see what I could come up with. So that's when I was doing a little bit of A&R work where I was finding artists on SoundCloud and sending them to record labels saying, hey, here's someone who could do a remix for you or whatever. And then in between 2 years of business school, I was in Sweden and I interned for the management company of AVICII. And after graduation, based on that experience, I was also inspired to try to start my own management company, which is when I started AZ Management, and just spent a couple of years looking online for new undiscovered talent and signing a few of them to management deals, and then trying to grow their career. So at the end of the day, the management aspect of that really early stage artist came back to marketing. It came back to how effectively could I create buzz and awareness around these artists. So when an artist is bigger, you have to do less of that. It's maybe more about like actually managing their day-to-day affairs or their business or whatever. But at the early stages, you're just trying to get them to be a household name. You want them to be booked on tour. You want them to do some big collaborations. So that was a several-year period of a lot of experimentation in music.
That is incredible, man. Yeah, dance music, business school. Oh my God, there's so much to dive into right there. And Sweden, doesn't it seem like that's where it all goes down? Isn't that where Spotify was founded as well?
Yeah, Sweden has a big reputation for music innovation and producing amazing artists, and not just the household name artists, but also the songwriters behind the scenes. They have they have dedicated music businesses. Even back in the 90s, like some of the top songwriters that were producing hits for Britney Spears and Sync,
Wow.
those songwriters were actually based in Sweden. So there's just been a long-standing um, focus in Sweden for young people to view that as a viable career to go into, and they're
Wow.
clearly very good at making mass market pop music. And so that was really cool to see on the ground, because if you're doing something in music in Sweden, you're very much looked at in high regard. People look at that with prestige. It's definitely not looked down on.
Yeah, that's incredible, man. Like I kind of had heard, whispers of like, yeah, Sweden, that's where it's at. Like I'm not privy as to the music scene, especially not as like as big as you are, but that is incredible, man. Why is that? Why Sweden? Is it just like there's just so many people that have come out of there and it's the infrastructure? What is it about Sweden that there's such a scene?
Yeah, a little bit is like, once there's enough momentum, then things get built and then it can just kind of continue. But I did hear some, and this is coming straight from Swedes, I did hear some speculation from people that, so they're super far north, right? Which means during the winter months, they have at the peak, like 20 hours of darkness in the day. In the same way they have 20 hours of light in the summer, they have 20 hours of darkness in the
I
winter.
can't imagine.
So people said that they basically needed like a creative outlet during that time, something to help them feel good and feel happy, because otherwise it's like seasonal depression magnified, because we are used to that in the US, it being a lot darker in the winter for longer, but not 20 hours a day of darkness. So people have said that that's a creative outlet and a way for people to stay happy and sane, and I tend to believe them.
That's insane, man. But it makes sense. And it's so crazy how like on the individual level, people like will turn, like you hear the saying, like turn pain into purpose, like just like something causing a ripple effect where it's like now you're using that like seasonal depression or what traumatic experience or whatever, and you've used it to now fuel a new creative outlet or a new endeavor. And that's just crazy how that has like cultural
Yeah.
implications and then implications into the music world as we know it globally. But that's incredible, man. So you mentioned like you're working with the management company of AVICII. AVICII passed away several years ago, no? Yeah,
Yeah.
AVICII, man. What was that like working with AVICII, man?
Well, I mean, he was not around the office a lot because he was out touring. I think part of what some of the documentaries that have gone into his life have covered is just how unsustainable that lifestyle can be if you don't set boundaries,
Mm.
especially as a DJ who you can travel very light, in the sense that if you're a band, you need to travel with equipment and your crew and all this stuff. But in the DJ world, you could go from a club to a festival, back to a club with literally just your laptop computer, and everything, all your light shows and everything at these venues would be digital. So it enabled artists to book a lot higher number of shows in a year, and it was lucrative enough that for a lot of people it was worth it to just say yes to a ton of those shows. And especially in dance music, and you're playing club shows versus like evening time concerts, you're oftentimes playing late into the night. And so you just can very, very easily get into an unhealthy lifestyle of bad sleep schedules, not eating properly, not exercising, being around alcohol, cigarettes, and whatever else just constantly, right?
Yeah, a lot
So
of us in that scene.
so on the one hand, like in reflecting back about why he wasn't around the office a lot, that kind of became obvious in hindsight, that it was just because he was so tied up with the touring part. But on the positive end, he was a mega star artist at that time. He had just released a new album shortly before I started my internship, so there was a lot of promotion and activity going on around new music of his, and that was just a really exciting thing to be able to contribute to. Working on social media account creation around that album, and coming up with some marketing ideas, and coming up with doing some A&R, finding remixers. Like, one story I like to tell about that time is uh, me and a few other people were asked to find artists to remix songs for Waiting for Love. And I had been reading about this brand new artist who was anonymous. He always wore a helmet, so nobody knew his real identity, who went by the name Marshmello. And so I reached out to his manager and ended up getting Marshmello to do his either first or second official remix ever. And that was, he was starting to bubble up in the dance music space, but hadn't gone mainstream at all. And now I would consider him close to a household name in an artist sense. So you just get really cool opportunities when you work with big artists like that, because obviously if I send an email to Marshmello's manager and says, would you like to do a remix for AVICII? Like, you're definitely going to respond to that email. So that was just the value of being attached to, such a big artist.
That's incredible, man. So you like directly played a large hand in a way in Marshmello becoming a household name, because I definitely say he's a household name, and in his peak, like in 2018, 19, like he was big, man. He was huge.
He was, yeah. And I take zero credit for him actually becoming a household name because he did all the work. And I think that the concept really resonated with people, that he was this anonymous figure. And I think the helmet itself is really cool. So I give a ton of credit to him as a talented artist, and also his manager Mo for actually turning that into a thing. But I'm happy to have given him a platform to keep, stepping up his game, because I'm sure that after he released an official Avicii remix, it was easier for them to then do other collaborations with people, because they could say, look, we just did this mega collab with Avicii, and now all of a sudden that's going to get artists who maybe wouldn't have worked with him before to say, yeah, sure, let's get in the studio. So was happy to give that opportunity, and he came through. He did a cool remix, so everybody won in the end.
No, that's incredible, man, that you like were able to give that platform for someone like him to keep stepping up, and he eventually kept stepping up and made it happen. That is amazing, man. What are some other cool stories from this time period of your life? And like I don't know, like I'm in my 20s, right? So I'm like, you went to Sweden. Like I'm also curious, like how important it is to kind of venture out there, see what's out there in terms of work, in terms of living, and like how important was that like long term to like I know people throw around the term like finding yourself, but like how important was all that?
I think for me personally, it was super. That's the only time I've ever lived internationally. Like I never did an exchange program or anything like that. I have traveled some internationally, but I'm not nearly as well traveled as others. So I think overall, it definitely opened up my worldview and made me more, I guess, understanding of the different cultures that are not the U.S. and how they choose to operate. That's different from the U.S. Right? Like there were a lot of things that I enjoyed about Sweden, just as far as how people treat each other, or the infrastructure that they have set up there to support society, including supporting creatives, people who want to pursue music, right? Like there are downsides to the US's overhyping of capitalism above all else, because it can make it very difficult to earn a living pursuing your art unless you're doing it in a very commercial mainstream way. So, things like that I think opened my eyes in a way that I wouldn't have if I had never lived there. Um, and yeah, in general, a lot of people go to business school after 4 or 5 years of the working world, which is about the time when a lot of people start to get the itch to do something new and just see what else is out there. And so I think business school is a great way to compress compress that trial and error into a very short amount of time, because you're able to take a lot of interesting classes, meet a lot of interesting classmates, do random internships, and just try out a lot of things without the pressure of, oh, I need to keep my full-time job because I need this salary, or whatever it is. So I highly recommend business school for that reason. And a lot of people traveled a ton during business school.
Very cool.
It's such an international experience. So you have classmates from almost every imaginable country. So a lot of times people would love to take cohorts of their classmates to their home country for a few days and kind of tour them around. And what better way to travel a country than with someone who's actually from there?
No, that's incredible, man. Two questions that come to mind during that beautifully articulated spiel. Um, One, how does Sweden support their creatives in a way that you wish they did in the USA? Because like I think about that all the time, right? I have friends who like maybe they're artists or maybe they do something within the creative space where it's like if they're not doing it in a very commercialized manner, they're not able to monetize it. But I feel like that almost discredits the artistry, like the art in its purest sense. Like what do they do over there that's like creates a better infrastructure for all that?
Well, I mean, hopefully what I say will be accurate to the way things are working today. I was living there in 2015, so 7 years ago. But I think countries like Sweden have a lot more grants and things that help financially people choose to not necessarily go down the business path so that they can pursue their artistry, right? Meaning, if you don't have to worry about putting a roof over your head and paying for your food and utilities every month, then you'll be a lot more inclined to kind of stick longer with your passion. So that's number one, is actually having dedicated funding to help support the arts, and allow people to pursue that as a career for a longer period of time. I think in the US, people have that opportunity to pursue it, but it's kind of like, well, if you don't make it in the first, year or two or three, then you're kind of are like forced to just go in a different direction. Versus I think in places like Sweden, they would just have more patience and a longer time frame on which to judge whether or not something is going to pan out. And then I think just having the programs, like the schooling and development and mentorship programs, a lot more built into all facets of their education system. The US has very, from my perspective, like kind of siloed institutions, right? You can choose to go to a music institute or go to an art institute, or just choose to go to a regular college. But you're forced to make that decision a lot earlier in the US and kind of specialize, versus if music is a lot bigger part of the program, the curriculum, no matter where you go to school, then you could have people discover it as something that they're good at or passionate about later on in life, and still end up making that a career. So I think because Sweden views music and pursuing the arts in high regard, then those type of decisions are made to set aside funds and to integrate the programs into their schooling, such that you have a flywheel of people coming in and out and making it.
100%, man. No, there's a lot of good stuff there. So one, like the financial implications of grants, and two, like longer time frames to allow creatives to iterate and find out what works for them, and find out if they really want to be in that space, and if they're actually like talented enough and things of that nature. And then the programs, the mentorships built in, the infrastructure at the educational level. Yeah, I think that's all super important, man. And it's crazy too, because it's like, I've talked about this on the platform before with one of my former finance professors, and we were talking about, the implications of student debt and things of that nature. And we're talking about how kind of insane it is in America, where it's like you're 18 and you're supposed to like get very specialized and decide what you're going to do with the next 40 years of your life. So it's, there's a lot of drawbacks from that. And, when you specialize, especially now that like there's specializations, and you're on paternity leave right now, you got the kiddos there in the house with you in Queens, moving into that era of life. So I'm like, I'm sure maybe you think about this, how like, there's programs now that are specializing in middle school. Like, oh, we're going to put you on the pre-doctoral path in middle school, and high school. You'll take like, bio classes. And by the time you get to college, you'll be ahead of the game. But it's like, what if you decided in middle school you wanted to be a doctor, and then when you're older, you realize like, no way, you've already pigeonholed yourself. So I think there's a lot of drawbacks to the infrastructure of like specialization. Like it is good for some people that really know, like I do know some people that like, they wanted to be a lawyer since they were 5, and now they're a lawyer and they love it and they're credible for them. But for the broad majority of people, I don't really think that's the case. I think it's like an evolution of figuring out what you want to do and where you want to be.
Yeah, definitely. I I don't think, yeah, I don't think it's bad to have specialization either, but if we can remove the stigma of someone changing their mind and like wanting to go to a different path, then that I think will make it a lot less scary for people who are maybe too far down that path and are like, well, it's too late, I can't switch out, to actually realize, no, it's not too late. You can start over. And if you do start over at 18 or 21 or 26, that it's okay. Like I've been working professionally for 12 years and I still feel like the rest of my career could go in a completely new direction. So um, what we want to avoid is, I guess, people feeling like they're stuck once they do make that decision.
Yeah, 100%, man. Eliminating the stigma of, the stigma around not being able to pivot or change spaces or careers, or or functions. And I feel like that leaks into like all sorts of other stuff in marriage. And that would be going into like a whole other tangent. But anyways, no, yeah. Some powerful wisdom there, man. The second question I had is business school. So you went to Harvard for your MBA. How important was that to your career? You know, because like in this generation, it's kind of like, is the MBA worth it? And I feel like it
Mhm.
just really depends on the person and their academic background, their career background. But like, how important was it for you and where you are now?
I, s- I mean, I certainly don't regret it, partially because I met my now wife during business school. So a lot of
Awesome.
life came out of that. But as far as like a different place it's put me professionally, based on the industries that I've chosen, in the near term, so since 2016, I would say it actually hasn't given me a ton of advantages in the sense that within music and entertainment more broadly, they don't really care that you have an MBA. It's not like it got me a lot of, at least in the type of work that I'm doing, it's not like it got me a lot of opportunities and jobs that I wouldn't have had otherwise. That's not the case for other industries, right? People in finance or consulting, or people who are on a CEO path at a giant corporation. Like those people do get real immediate value after business school in terms of the jobs that they're able to get hired for or increases in pay just because they have an MBA. Now, I believe that my, skills and network and just having that on my resume will still be worth it in the long term over the course of my whole career. But if you looked at it just on a dollar for dollar basis right now, it was definitely an expensive thing for me to go do. I definitely haven't like recouped that same amount of additional value from those 2 years. Not just because of the cost of the program itself, but also the opportunity cost of then stopping work for 2 years. You combine the cost itself and the opportunity cost, and it can easily be $500,000 decision to go to school, you know?
Absolutely. Aside from like the monetary side of it, like what about just being surrounded by your peers and networking with them and now having those connections as you guys continue to move forward in your careers? Because I'd imagine, right, like Harvard MBA, right? Like I know you're a humble dude, but let's like call it what it is. Like this is top notch. This is, prestigious at, prestige at its finest, so to speak. So like, who were the kind of people you were around and what had they done, and were like how valuable was it like learning from them and then the professors at Harvard as well?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think the same with any academic institution, like what you get out of it is what you
Mhm.
make of it, in the sense that the professors are there and they have amazing backgrounds and a wealth of knowledge, but you still have to kind of seek them out and try to spend extra time and develop that relationship. So you can go to a program like Harvard and not, not get that amazing professor network out of it unless you actually put in the time. You know what I mean? So for me, I knew for sure that I still wanted to stay in kind of the media and entertainment realm. So a lot of my relationship development time that I spent at HBS was with professors and people who were in that same space. So from that perspective, I feel very well connected with my other classmates who have then chosen to go into media and entertainment. And so it's a smaller group of people that I would stay in touch with more regularly because not that many people out of business school chose to go into media and entertainment, including sports, by the way. Um, but that smaller number of people that I'm connected to, I am close enough with that if I needed a favor from them, I could call them up and they would say yes, no problem, and vice versa. Combine that with the fact that my wife, who was also business school, and she has her own network of people in a completely different industry, I can kind of benefit from that network as well. Um, but I think going back to what we said earlier about how people would always answer my emails when I would, if AVICII was in the subject line, it was the same thing while I was at Harvard. And I did a speaker series where I would invite artists and their managers who were touring the Boston area to come give a talk at Harvard. And and it was pretty successful as far as getting big artists there. And the reason why I was so successful is if you're an artist manager and you get an email that says come talk at Harvard in the subject line, like you're definitely opening that email. So I was able to bring the Chainsmokers and their manager to talk there. I was able to bring Alice in Wonderland, DJ from Australia, she and her manager there. Kygo's manager came through. And even after I graduated, they had artists like DJ Khaled come give a talk at Harvard. So that name just carries so much weight that anybody who's there and can use that at harvard.edu email address to their advantage can definitely get their foot in the door with a lot of different people.
Absolutely, man. Shit, that makes me question, like, you still use the Harvard emails occasionally? Like,
when you graduate, they give you like, I still have an at hbs.edu address, but it says your class name in it. So it's clear that I'm not a current student. It's like HBS class of 2016.edu or whatever. But yeah, if I were to email someone from that, I definitely think it would stand out more than sending it from my at Gmail.
Absolutely. That's it's so crazy. I feel like you and me kind of being privy to the marketing game, you try to like be conscious of that bias that comes with it, with a name, and try to analyze it like objectively aside from that. But like no matter what, like names carry weight, brands carry weight, like even at a subconscious psychological level. But that's incredible, man. Chainsmokers, Alice in Wonderland, Kygo, DJ Khaled. I mean, I already knew you were the man, Jeff, but I mean, this is a lot of stuff here.
Like you said, just trying to make middle school Jeff think that I'm cool.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, man. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you connect with Anita. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce her last name, but Anita Elberse.
Yeah. Yeah, I took her class my second year, and she's the main professor that is aligned with my interests. So I very much enjoyed the class and all the guests that she had come speak to us.
Very cool, man. What was the class?
The name has changed since I took it, but I think it's now called Business of Entertainment, Media, and Sports. And the Harvard method is based on case studies about different companies. And so all the case studies that she writes are about people and companies in the broader entertainment space. So she's done cases on Formula One recently. She has one with Dwayne Wade. She had one about Beyonce and her Parkwood management company. And then she also hosts, outside of the regular school year, kind of an executive education program where she'll invite former professional athletes and executives in the entertainment space to come take a 1-week intensive course. So you have some pretty big name ex-athletes who have actually, and celebrities who have gone through and taken this class.
Absolutely.
LL Cool J, Tyra Banks, I think Channing Tatum did it. I want to say Maria Sharapova as well. So there's a lot of cool people have come through the Harvard campus as a result of that program.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, no, I saw this week she has UFC fighter Kukui, Tony Ferguson there for the executive program. I actually, this podcast episode I ever did with Amobi Akugo, he's an ex-MLS player, but he did that program over there as well. But she's just a genius, man. Like I attended their like online little like 1-day, glimpse into the program when we did a case study on LLMR, I believe it is, LeBron James and Mav Carter's marketing and how they were like deciding between a deal with Microsoft and another entity. I don't remember the specifics, but it was pretty cool. And she just seems like brilliant, man. It makes me inclined to like want to go over there and do that as well. And plus I've never been to Boston. It seems like a cool place to be, but I just feel like anytime you surround yourself with that caliber of person, there's a lot to be learned. But that's super cool you had that opportunity. I can't imagine how I'd feel in there too, because like I had imposter syndrome in a sense coming to UT because there's like some brilliant minds here. But yeah, I can't imagine, man. Would you say it was like as hard as it seems, the program?
I mean, the overall MBA for me, there were definitely certain subjects that did not come very naturally to me. Anything in the financial realm is just not something I'm very well equipped at. But for a lot of people, that was super easy because that was the job that they did. Versus for me, the entertainment class felt very easy because I just felt like I already had a very good base of knowledge from just paying attention to the industry. So overall, I mean, because it's business school is typically less grade focused than undergrad, there's less pressure to, get a 4.0 because a 4.0 doesn't exist. They don't give you those type of grades. So it's really just about maximizing the experience, especially especially if you're paying for it out of your own pocket, you feel much more inclined to get your money's worth.
1,000%. And my thing too is like when you talk about maximizing the opportunity to network with your professors and your peers, I mean, like you've already put in all the work throughout your whole life to be there. Like, why not maximize it and kind of get over that anxiety of speaking up and like just ask the questions and make the connections. It's kind of my philosophy about just at whatever level you're at. Like I've always found it kind of confusing and dumbfounding in a sense that like some of my peers, it's like you've worked 4 years to get this degree and spent so many countless hours and long nights working for it, but you don't want to put in 1 hour to go to this networking event and make a connection that can like leapfrog
Hmm.
you into a new position. It's kind of like it almost doesn't make sense in a sense, but that's a whole other thing. Jeff, how much time do you have, man? I want to be respectful for your time. I want to dive into the
Yeah,
ESPN and some of the Sony
yeah,
stuff, and then move into crypto. But I want to be respectful of your
yeah.
time, man. Little
No,
baby.
let's keep going. Like you said, I'm on paternity leave and my kids are at daycare today. So I'm
Hey.
currently.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I always used to wonder, like, how in the world does Joe Rogan go for 3 hours with these guests, like consistently, like every episode? But when I'm talking with someone like you, like it's very easy because like each experience you can go down the rabbit hole, and each
Yeah.
topic you go down the rabbit hole, and it's almost like now that I've done a couple episodes, I'm kind of starting to see why, because it's like, yeah, you could do a 30-minute or 1 hour episode, but it's kind of like you got to be strict with the questioning and how much you can tangent off. Versus like if you kind of want to organically go through the whole experience and story of someone's career or life, it's like you kind of have to leave a little wiggle room to dive into those tangents that are kind of important to hit on. And I feel like that's where the gems blossom. But I appreciate your time, man. It's a fun conversation.
Yeah, no doubt.
Um, yeah, so jumping like back into the music stuff, man. So how was it like founding your own thing with AZ and running that and then like jumping to ESPN? Like how did that all kind of shake out and evolve?
Well, there was one stop in between those two, which was I did a year of strategy at Sony Music. So during my time with artist management, I learned a ton about the music industry that I didn't know before from more from the perspective of the artist. Like, what does it take to actually make it as an artist? So I figured out about all these different parts of the industry that when I was at iTunes, I didn't need to concern myself with because we just had a single task, which was release albums and singles and market them to people. And so for me, the Sony part was a way to then go deeper on a specific part of the music industry, the label part, and learn more about how they operated because they have so much consolidated power in the music industry um, that you know they must be doing something right in order to keep that power. Otherwise, they would have been dissolved a long time ago. And I personally think labels do add value, even though I think some of the business deals are not necessarily that fair to artists. The labels still do add a lot of value as far as like actually um, helping a musician flourish once they've kind of had some success. But for me, the story of AZ management was a bit of a passion thing in the sense that I had the luxury of being in a position in my life to start my own thing and not necessarily be too concerned with how much money it would bring in. Like I had a year or two of runway where, and I had some financial backing where I was basically like break even, but I definitely wasn't making a ton of money unless I was able to make my artist successful. But not everybody has that luxury to have that amount of time to go pursue this thing. And I learned a lot, and I worked with a half dozen different talented artists during that time. But in the end, when I look back on it, I definitely don't describe it as a success in the sense that I didn't break any artists into the mainstream from working with them. It didn't turn into something that I was financially stable off of, right? Like I wasn't making enough money for it to be a full-time thing. So switching over and taking the Sony job was a little bit of admitting defeat in that regard, that, hey, I tried this out, and there are certain things I would do differently in terms of how I'd approach it, but it was fun. I learned a lot, and now I'm ready to go try a new challenge. So that's how I look back on that period. But then to bridge to ESPN, I think towards the end of my time in music, sports has been a big part of my life, my whole life, just as a player and a fan. And I was feeling more and more just drawn to getting back into that space. I know plenty of people in that space who are either athletes themselves or have chosen to work in it professionally. So I just felt like I was well connected. It was something that I was spending a lot of time consuming, just watching sports or going to games. And so I was thinking, okay, can I find a job where it can be in sports, but it still will take advantage of the work that I've put in to really understand the media and entertainment landscape, music, movies, TV. And that kind of perfect combination luckily came about at the right time with ESPN, where I joined the marketing team, the brand marketing team, and they specifically wanted someone who was coming from the broader entertainment industry as opposed to the sports industry, because they specifically wanted to do marketing that was targeted towards non-sports fans. Like, how can we make sports interesting for people who are not already consuming sports? So they wanted to tap into people who came from the music industry or TV or movies. And so my background just happened to be a great fit for that role. And as a result, I got to work on some pretty cool things at ESPN, all of which were geared towards non-sports fans.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. And that takes me back. Time flies. Like, it's already been 2 years since I had interned there. And that's when I got the chance to connect with you over one of my summer projects, was like looking at the intersections of culture where sports was intersecting with fashion, music, culinary, business. So that's like incredible that you were able to work at that intersection, man. What was that like? And what would you say the keys to success were for you working within that like super specific and unique realm where it kind of like tied everything together?
Mhm. Well, I mean, I was fortunate that a lot of the cool stuff I got to work on was just handed to me, in the sense that, like, I didn't have to do any work for us as a company to have The Last Dance,
Mm.
right? The Last Dance was just a thing that was going to happen regardless. And then I was given the open-ended question of, okay, can you do some marketing campaigns to help make The Last Dance more exciting to non-sports fans? So that's a super big ingredient, in the sense that you can be an amazing marketer, but if the product that you're marketing is not super compelling, you're going to have a hard time actually converting people. And so with ESPN, they had some very, very compelling projects like The Last Dance that made my job easy, in the sense that it was not that difficult to get people interested in at least having a conversation to hear about a Michael Jordan related project. So that was one part that helped make my job easy, was just the products themselves were very compelling. But then there were certain other projects that I worked on that I had to kind of pitch and concept myself. And so that takes creativity and being proactive and not necessarily waiting for an assignment from people, but actually going out and pitching that assignment. We got to pitch this project that we did called Hype Hits directly to ESPN CEO, and that was a cool experience that wouldn't have happened if myself and a few other people who worked on it with me didn't take the initiative. So I think in a lot of these businesses, just like what I was saying earlier with business school, it is what you make of it, in the sense that you're not just going to be handed opportunities. A lot of times you have to try to create the opportunities yourself and see if the answer is yes or no. But I prefer the proactive approach to just sitting around waiting for like amazing opportunities to be handed to you.
For sure. Yeah, no, a lot of great wisdom there. And like to your point, it makes the marketer's job a lot easier when the product itself is already very compelling. And in a sense, I think that's like a fundamental pillar of like honest and great marketing. Like I recently read like Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, and Phil Knight talks about how in the early stages he wasn't very big on advertising and marketing because he wanted the product to be incredible. And then from there, when the product is already incredible, then you can market the ideology and philosophy of the brand as opposed to just the product. Like, I feel like the greatest brands, that's what they do. Nike markets, victory and being different and being, giving it your all, as opposed to the cleats or the dry fit, where an Apple, like, think different, be different, as opposed to the actual functions of the MacBook itself. Right. So I think that's pretty cool how, you got to work with some of the more compelling things, like obviously The Last Dance and, storytelling that. And then also some of the other stuff in terms of being proactive with like Hype Hits. I remember listening to that on Spotify in 2020. So props there, man. That's incredible, man. Is there any other like favorite moments and favorite projects from your time there? Like any athletes or musicians or producers you got to interact with?
Yeah, actually. So during the Hype Hits production phase, we worked with the ESPN talent department to line up some Zoom chats with various athletes and celebrities and musicians to talk about how music and sports were related, and specifically through the lens of like stadium anthems, stuff that gets the crowd pumped up, gets the athletes pumped up. So we did a whole slew of Zoom chats with people. And the most notable ones that stand out that we got were Jack Harlow, Victor Cruz. That was a cool one.
Cool.
JaVale McGee. And a few months later, he was on the championship winning team.
Yeah.
But like Sydney McLaughlin, who Olympic medalist. I don't even know how many medals she has, but yeah, just some really impressive people that I wouldn't have had the chance to interact with otherwise, besides the fact that we were taking the initiative and just running with this project that nobody assigned us. We just pitched it and people liked the idea. So I wouldn't have predicted, I guess, that we would be on Zoom calls with people when we first started.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, the pandemic changed a lot of things, which we'll get into crypto part of the conversation next. But like something that I've seen throughout this conversation is like you've been ahead of the times in terms of like spotting the next talent. Whether it was Marshmello or getting Jack Harlow a few years ago. Like I just recently went to the newly constructed Moody Center here at UT Austin and watched Jack Harlow perform. And
nice.
I'm a fan of his. Like I don't think he's like, top 3 or anything like that, but like I'm a big fan. He has some good songs. But like you got him a couple years ago before he really blew up in the way that he has since. And like JaVale McGee, I'm from Dallas, I'm a Mavs fan, so he's on the Mavs roster right now. Shout out JaVale McGee. But that's all really cool stuff, man. So you mentioned, never thinking we'd be in this like kind of like Zoom world, and we're kind of getting out of it now at the tail end of the pandemic. But after ESPN, man, like what inspires this new move to crypto.com? Like, you've been in so many other spaces, whether it be music, entertainment, sports, like what inspires this move? You know, is it the fortune favors the brave quote, like, you know, on your LinkedIn? Like, I mean, what inspires it?
Well, for me, like, if you look at the day to day of my job, there is a lot of consistency with stuff I've done in the past. So, day to day, I work with the sports organizations that Crypto.com has sponsorship deals with and help those people create NFT programs. So, we sponsor a lot of different people in the sports space: UFC as a league, Formula One, Aston Martin Racing, Philadelphia 76ers, Angel City Football Club, Paris Saint-Germain. The list is really long, right? The company was not shy about spending sponsorship money. And so even though the overall company is in a very different space, in the sense that the business model is to make money off of operating a currency exchange, what I'm doing every day doesn't feel that dissimilar from kind of a combination of what I did at ESPN with the sports partnerships, as well as my time at iTunes. Like, I view the stuff that we sell as NFTs as very similar to what we were selling during my iTunes days of movies and TV downloads. It's about, it's about finding the projects that are interesting and surfacing those projects for users. But yeah, it certainly has been strange, I guess, to be in it in the time that I am in it, right? Like, I joined there in the beginning of 2022. 2021 was an amazing year for crypto across the board, right? Anybody who was in it, coin values were up across the board. NFTs were exploding. NBA Top Shot was super successful. All sorts of artists and celebrities were launching their own NFT programs. So, and also around that time, there was this big announcement about Crypto.com and the naming rights for the old Staples Center with the Lakers arena. So all of those things combined, I was like, this is a great place to be if I want to continue working in sports and entertainment, because there are all of those ingredients. Now, I still get the opportunity to do those things, but the macro environment is obviously more challenging than when I started at the beginning of the year.
Absolutely.
And for that, I think I try to just remind myself to be patient, and that it's very easy to get caught up in the day-to-day changes, specifically if it's looking at prices. But when you zoom out, I think any of these like real technological inflection points take time to mature and reach their full potential. Like, it was several years after the iPhone was released that the App Store actually took it to another level where people could start developing their own apps. When the iPhone was released, you literally only had the apps that Apple made. So there wasn't a whole lot you could do besides listen to music, take a photo, email, get directions on maps. Like, that was it. But then once the App Store opened, all these use cases exploded. And my hope is that, the same thing will happen in NFT and in blockchain in general. And we just need to give it a little more time.
100%, man. No, all great stuff there, like you said. And yeah, no, it's exciting. You know, you guys just got the naming rights to formerly known as Staples Center, crypto.com arena now. And it's so cool seeing all the moves that you guys are making. And like you said, I can't imagine in terms of like how the environment has changed from, during the pandemic, when everything is just up and up and up, even the so-called, shit coins, so to speak, like a Doge or a Shiba or stuff like that. And I'm not privy, maybe those aren't, shit coins as they say, but like whatever the case may be, those have depleted in value more so than other coins that are seen as more stable coins, like a Bitcoin or an Ethereum. I'm very bullish on the space. I like the idea of decentralized finance and, crypto. Do you think someone has to be like, or like kind of, do you think most people that are working in the space like yourself are very bullish on it long term?
I think there was probably a whole wave of people that joined because of the hype of
Right.
2021 that were not full,
Mm.
term believers, and
Gotcha.
who knows, maybe a lot of those people have cycled out already. But I do think that anybody who's been in the space for more than a year or two definitely is bought in, right? Like if you were working in this space in 2018 or 2016, then you were a super early adopter and you had to have been very optimistic about the future potential, because those were not easy times for crypto either, right? Like not necessarily the prices were down, but there were years at a time where the value of Bitcoin or Ethereum was pretty flat. So even at that time, there wasn't a huge like financial incentive to be participating because the prices weren't going up.
For sure.
So people had to believe in other reasons why it was going to make sense long term than just whether or not the value of that coin would go up.
Mm.
And so that's the same kind of point of view that I try to look at it with.
100%. Yeah, you mentioned the macro environment and kind of just zooming out aside from like the day-to-day fluctuations in the space. Like, how important is that now? Like during this week alone, I haven't been paying like too close of attention, but I've seen like, I don't know, some like insane fluctuations like with and news coming out around like Binance and FTX and like solvency issues and like, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on like all the madness going on, and what even is going on right now in the space? I don't even know.
Well, the fact that it made headlines for people who are even not paying close attention to crypto tells you just how kind of big and impactful this week's news was. I would compare it to, there's a number of big well-known banks, right? Wells Fargo, Citibank, Chase, whatever. FTX was one of those well-known crypto exchanges. Binance is another one, crypto.com is another one, Coinbase is another one. And especially last year when everything was going well for crypto, they were one of the leaders. They were near the top of the pack. But essentially some bad business practices have come to light that put the assets that users had deposited into FTX, put those assets at jeopardy. And so yeah, they've had to declare bankruptcy, essentially because they mishandled the funds of people that deposited money with FTX. I think that it's not an indictment on a cryptocurrency exchange in general, because there is still a need for that product to exist. It's just that from my perspective, they were operating in a risky way and were being a little bit greedy by trying to take the money that wasn't really theirs to begin with and make even more money off of it than they should have been allowed to. So it was all in pursuit of just unlimited gains, right? And that's a fallacy to begin with.
Yeah, it's a fallacy to begin with, man. It's got to be like the wildest financial times since like, that period around the real estate crisis in like '08, right? With just the way the financial markets have done, like whether it be equities or just rate hikes from the Fed. And then now with everything going on in crypto, it's just wild to see. Like I have a BlockFi credit card that, they were given like 3.5%
Yeah.
cash in crypto for a while there. And now I've seen that, I forget who owns BlockFi, but it's like they put a halt on, transactions there. So it's just wild to see the way things are shaking out, man, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's not safe out there, and it's good to know what you're getting involved in before you get all the way involved. Point. They were, I mean, 3.5% now wouldn't be outrageous because even banks are offering like 3%. But if you're offering 3.5% when banks were offering next to zero, then I think as a consumer, you got to ask yourself, like, where is that 3.5% coming from? Like, how is their business model able to support that? And that, I think, was what sucked a lot of people in, was these very attractive high rates. But then it also allowed companies to kind of make promises that they couldn't deliver on if the situation changed, which it did.
100%, man. No, wild times, and we'll continue to see how it shakes out. But I am bullish. I'm with you there on, BTC and Ethereum, and kind of the potential it has for, you know, democratizing finance and just alleviating a lot of issues we see within finance and politics, man. Like, do you have any other thoughts on like just decentralized finance or fintech, like moving forward?
Well, I'm definitely not the expert in this space.
Yeah, me
A
either.
lot of people have much smarter points of view here, but I think there have been some use cases in even like the crises around the Ukraine war, where there were actually positive use cases of people being able to send and receive currency as support for people in Ukraine. And I think that's a lot of the inspiration around decentralized finances, just creating a system that couldn't necessarily be blocked or controlled by any bad actor government, for example. So I don't know how close we are to that version of reality, but I think that the inspiration behind why that thing should exist does seem credible to me, because there's a lot of examples of countries that have suffered under bad leadership and had no alternative as far as their currency goes.
Absolutely, man. No, like the Ukraine example, I remember in March and April, there was so many stories coming out about how people were using crypto and how it was like really like just changing lives, man. Yeah, I am excited though for the future. Once the crypto winter, as they say, kind of subsides and things kind of level out with the economy. I am excited to see what the future holds. And a book I've had on my radar is like the Bitcoin Standard, and how it talks about fiat currency and the downsides of that, and how crypto can, like we talked about before, just fix a lot of issues. But I'm curious, man. So we talked, you mentioned Dapper Labs earlier, and we've talked about how you are, you had the NFT efforts in a way at crypto.com. What's that space like, man? How would you break that down in layman's terms, in terms of like what a non-fungible token is and how it plays into the sports space and the evolving Web3 space?
Well, I think the easiest way to describe an NFT is just a digital collectible, right?
Right.
And I think that makes a lot of sense to people in the sports space, because memorabilia and sports cards have been popular for decades. Getting a version of a ball, or getting a rare sports card, like those things make sense to people, because they like to collect these pieces of history related to their favorite teams and their favorite athletes.
100%.
And NFTs work best when they're connected to a passion point, and people are very passionate about their favorite sports, their favorite athletes, their favorite teams. So from that perspective, I think sports is a great fit for NFTs, because people will just inherently want to collect things that they care about. And so I think Top Shot and Dapper, they did some great innovations as far as reconcepting what a sports card could be for the digital era. And rather than it just being a static thing with a picture, they decided to take actual game highlights and make that the basis of the NFT. So from that perspective, I definitely do expect all sports to have a presence in NFTs, because their fans will always just want to, lean in and engage with anything they can in their favorite sport. I do think that because things were going so well in 2021, there became some unrealistic expectations about how much these things should cost.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of people have gotten turned off and priced out by, frankly, some of just the greed from the organizations who just saw an easy way to make money. So in my opinion, we as an industry need to focus on digital collectibles that can be bought or distributed as cheaply as possible, so that we're focused on the wide part of the sports fan funnel rather than just the very narrow part of, the wealthiest people who are also fans of that thing. So in the same way, you used to be able to go into a store and buy a pack of baseball cards for $1. Like, it doesn't make sense to me if digital collectibles that are produced in large quantities are the minimum price is $100 for things like that. That's just not money, especially when the economy's down, that people can afford to spend. So I think we should look at it a little bit differently in order to make it more sustainable long term.
Yeah, thank you, Gary V, for causing this problem. No, I'm just kidding, but no, it is crazy to see like how, in a sense, a lot of these highly influential people, such as a Patrick Bet-David or Gary V, can essentially kind of move the market in a sense with some of the things they're touting. And I think truly, I truly believe this, that Gary V played a large part of like the collectibles market, like really turning up in the way they did with his content and Vayner Sports and Vayner Media, and just like, whether that's intentional or not, I don't know. But I mean, it's just kind of interesting in any realm of the financial world when, someone touts something when they've got a vested interest in it. I think we have to all be like aware of who has vested interest in what, and then take their perspective on it with a grain of salt based off of that. But I think
Yeah,
what's
exactly.
about the sports space, as you alluded to, is like the ability with these collectibles to also like tack on, experiences that are tied into them, right? Like the opportunity to meet and greet with a player, a signage, or I know a lot of NFTs have like, you have events tied to them that you have access to because you're a holder of these NFTs. So I think the potential there is very cool, man. And it's cool that you're able to work with so many cool brands, whether it be like F1, UFC, Paris Saint-Germain, and PSG just seems to do a good job with everything they do, whether it be like the Jordan partnership or just any of the things they do in the digital space, or aside from all that. But we've
Yeah.
been at it for a minute, man. I know you're busy, man, and you're on paternity leave. I'm sure the kiddos are getting out of daycare soon. So I want to end us off with some questions here, man. One, if you could give any advice for people trying to break into the space, like what are the biggest things that you can think of for people that want to break into sports and entertainment and music?
Yeah, the biggest thing I think is it's easier to pivot to the perfect job at the perfect company once you're already in the building. So don't don't hesitate to take a job that maybe is not your most ideal, just so that you can start building relationships. If you know the company that you want to work for, right? Start building relationships and then eventually look for an opportunity to transfer internally. I think it's a lot easier to transfer internally than to wait around for the perfect position at the company that you want, and then also win and get hired for that position. So, because companies love to hire internally versus externally. So, even if it doesn't look like the perfect job, but it's something that you could be good at, I would recommend giving it a shot.
1000%. Any other favorite moments or highlights or people that you want to shout out that we didn't mention here on the episode prior?
Mm, I mean, shout out to my wife. She's a baller and does a great job of being a professional working mom and taking care of the kids. I am on paternity leave, but she still has to tell me what to do to take care of the kids. So shout out to all the moms out there, because raising kids is definitely not easy and very time consuming. But yeah, other than that, man, shout out to you. I respect your hustle, and it's cool seeing what you're up to since your time at ESPN, and know you're going to do great things regardless. So appreciate you having me on to just chat and pontificate on life.
The pontification, man. Yeah, that's what it's all about. No, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate the kind words and support and motivation. And I really enjoyed this episode, man, just picking your brain and being able to honor you and showcase you and the great, journey you've been on. Honored to be just a small part of that. And be able to showcase all your wisdom on the space, man. You know, you've obviously done a lot of cool things, and I'm hyped to continue to see the cool things you'll do now in the crypto space with crypto.com. Yeah, man, thank you so much. This has been fun, bro.
Much appreciated. Love it. Great way to end a Friday.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this conversation between myself and Jeff Zeller. Hope you guys took away a bit of wisdom that you can apply towards your own careers, your own lives, to help you guys achieve your goals. Links to connect with Jeff are down below, to connect with myself on all platforms. If you haven't already, we appreciate a like, a subscribe, a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and reviews. That helps us out a lot. You guys have an incredible week, and let's keep doing this together. Later.
Don't be such a smart aleck.